I'm really excited to be here with you today. As Lisa said, I'm involved in literacy wearing a lot of different hats, and that was actually the biggest challenge for putting together the presentation, because I feel like all of the pieces connect, and I'll try to create and weave this through line for you so it doesn't just seem random. But I'll start just a little bit with my background. So like many of you that I know in this room, I started as a teacher, and I think it was just my second year of teaching when I started to realize that not all of the students that I had as a middle school teacher were readers. And in fact, one of the classes I taught was called Reading Strategies. And it's one of those courses with good intentions, but execution is tough. Because these are students, 6th and 7th graders, that haven't passed the MCA test in reading. So they get registered for this course called Reading Strategies that has good intentions, right? It's supposed to give them a little scoop of extra reading so then hopefully they'll be brought up to speed. And so in my teacher preparation program, I came through in the era of whole language. Raise your hand if you also were taught the whole language method. Okay, yes, I taught it too. Yes, and through whole language, we were taught to remediate readers through, it was called reading strategies. So are we thinking as we read? Are we asking questions? Are we making predictions, visualizing the text? None of those things are inherently bad, but it doesn't help someone who doesn't know how to lift the words off the page. And so what I found with my struggling 6th and 7th graders as a brand new teacher was that if I was reading the text aloud to them, they could be successful in visualizing and predicting and questioning as they read. But if I turned the text back over to them, then all of those behaviors would come out, right? It was, oh, my stomach hurts, I need to go to the nurse. Oh, I'm gonna mess around in the back corner with this student. Oh, what kind of distraction can I create so that my class doesn't see that I can't actually read? And the light bulbs went off. I talked to the special educator in the building and I said, her name happened to be Lisa too, a different Lisa. But I said, Lisa, these 7th graders I'm working with can't actually read the words yet. And she said, they probably have dyslexia. I have the Sunday system in my office. You can take it home and read it and then teach it to them. Well, I'm admitting this on camera, but as somebody that in teacher prep was taught whole language, I took a look at that binder and I said, I don't know what a diphthong is. I don't know what a digraph is. What do you mean affix? What are all of these words? And I mean, I hate to say this on camera, but I genuinely could not figure out how to use Sunday when I didn't have that background knowledge myself. But I'm a problem solver, and I wasn't just going to let my ineptitude affect the lives of my students. And that really set me on the journey of how do I learn so that I can fix these reading gaps that my students have, but then also, how do I change this system? Something was missing in my teacher prep, and I need to figure this out. And so that's how my journey got started. I did a master's degree here at Bethel, and that helped me to learn to take a look at what issues students were having specifically, kind of break down, okay, where within the word are they struggling? And that was the first step. But then I wanted to know more, and that first Emily Hanford podcast came out, if you remember it, in 2018 or 2019. And what I found as I listened to that was exactly, she articulated the same issue that I had as an early teacher so well. And at this time I had started my dissertation work at the University of Minnesota. And through that work, I had discovered what was being termed now as the science of reading and structured literacy. And so my journey of actually knowing how to help those struggling readers is pretty new. I've only had about 8 years of actual work with that and about 12 where I wasn't doing all of the right things. I was doing some good things. I was building those relationships. I was building kids up. I was giving them the tools I had. but not all of them. So my dissertation work took a look at how we train teachers in Minnesota. And so I got these syllabi from all the literacy classes at all of our institutions in Minnesota, and I coded them. I reviewed them and coded them, looked for themes to see, were we teaching structured literacy or were we not? And actually that dissertation research, which predominantly showed we were not doing the right thing yet, helped lead to the READ Act. It was enough of the, okay, here's some actual data that we can put before legislatures to quantify the problem. And Arlene, did you hear me talking about you? Because here she walks in, Arlene Sunday herself. Arlene, I was just talking about teacher prep, and when I was trained in whole language, someone gave me your binder later when I had struggling students and said, this is what you need to unlock things for students. But because of my poor teacher prep training, I couldn't unlock the jewel of your program. And I should have called you, yes. But anyway, I made that journey, and now I can unlock it. And my purpose in saying it was we needed to change the system. And we're seeing that happen. This is not just an Abbey thing. This is a nationwide movement where we're finally seeing what those of you in the dyslexia community have known for decades. We're seeing it brought to that national level. But this was just my small piece of it now. And then one last piece, and then I'll quit talking about myself, is at the University of Minnesota right now, we have a grant to do some fMRI work because I'll show you a video from Nadine Gabb. She has discovered that from 18 months on, we actually see the structural differences, the neurological differences in students with dyslexia and students without, or I shouldn't say students, they're not students yet, they're babies. Toddlers, we notice these structures are different. And you might be thinking, well, we're not going to bring fMRI machines into the schools, so why does it matter? It matters because when we know the structure of the brain, we're able to know what factors can strengthen the systems of the brain. And we know that our brains are neuroplastic. And so that research has helped me understand a little bit more deeply about things we can do to make a difference. So I just want to pause for a second. And when we think about that concept of orthographic mapping, if you think you could come up here, I'm not going to make you come up here, but if you could come up here and explain the process of orthographic mapping, will you give me a 5? If you've never heard the term before, give a 0. And if you're somewhere in between, just show me where you are. So when we talk orthographic mapping. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of experts in the room, which is wonderful, so I'm not going to belabor this. But for the few people that are a little bit unfamiliar with the term orthographic mapping, I think this is really where a lot of literacy knowledge hinges. So orthographic mapping is a mental process of understanding which parts of the orthography or the written language, how they connect with the sounds. And so if we can understand, and we heard an amazing example with the Thai student that Pete Bowers just showed us, if we understand that SH works together to make this sh sound, and that we don't say f, I, s, we are on our road to having that mental process in place. And once a word is orthographically mapped, then we have the cognitive resources left over to comprehend what we read. I'm going to whiz right by this because Mr. Bowers did such a nice job with this. But we know that these processes all connect in the brain. But when we take a look at this and we're thinking about phonology, which is typically where students who struggle to read also have some struggles, one piece of phonology that phonology hinges on is oral language. And oral language develops from birth. And so I'd love to show you I think this is my favorite video of all time, of this little conversation between a dad and a son.
Did you understand it though? No. Oh, not this one. This one, Mr. Van, that I'm like, what in the world? Don't do it here, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Really? I do the same thing. We think a lot alike, huh? Crazy. Right.
Okay, so obviously the most adorable child I think I've ever seen, but if you think about the skills that went on there, this is a baby. I mean, I don't think this child is even walking, and he has absorbed so much about how conversation works. They had that serve and return. He knows that you say something, someone responds. You say something back, you might make a connection. You might elaborate on what you were saying. He even has those elements of like speaking, where he's speaking with his hands and gesturing. I mean, he's just an incredible gift. I'd love to see where this kid is. I think he's probably about 5 or 6 now. But anyway, this oral language, these experiences and interactions that we take the time to have with our littlest children are the foundation of their precursors to reading. They are giving them the language and the skills, and even before this child can actually articulate the actual words, he already knows so much about language. So that's someone who's probably a little bit under 1, and then this is someone who just turned 2.
Yes, I would like to come to your ice cream store, Mia. What kind of flavors do you have today?
I got them all.
You have them all. Wow.
But I'm also missing one.
Oh, what one are you missing?
I'm missing one.
Oh, are you missing the strawberry topping?
Yeah, it am.
There you go, find it. Could I please have mint chocolate chip?
What is my chocolate chip?
It's the green one.
Do you like it? And also, same color in my turtle cake.
It is the same color as your turtle cake. You're right. Could I also have Rocky Road?
What is it?
Yeah, it's that one. It has chocolate ice cream with marshmallows. That's what the white things are supposed to be. Yeah, marshmallows. What flavor is that one?
Marshmallow.
Oh, and then what's the white one?
What is this one?
That was cookie dough.
I'm gonna be my friend then. I'm gonna give up. I'm gonna give my friend them all.
Oh, do you think that might be too many?
So again, just having that interaction, that back and forth interaction. And at the risk of sounding completely judgmental and putting you all off on my talk, unfortunately, sometimes we are seeing these interactions being replaced with a screen. And all of us in the classroom are working with children now. We have those students that come to us and they don't have the skills to have that back and forth conversation. We're seeing their vocabulary decline. We're seeing more and more kids needing the speech and language help. And a big piece of this is because tablets make it easy, right? Your kid is quiet and will just be on their tablet for pretty much as long as you let them. And you can be on your phone or you can be getting your work done. Sometimes it's a necessity thing, right? There are times, especially during the pandemic, when we had to kind of throw the screen time throw the screen time rules out the window because we had to keep life functioning. But when we're not in crisis, we have to reevaluate. How are we spending our time with our littlest ones? Are we building the skills that they need in order to be successful in reading? So a big piece of this that I think is helpful for parents to know, and I know several of you in the room have read this book, The Science of Reading, a handbook, and actually I saw it referenced in Pete's slides a couple times too. It's Snowling, Charles Hume, and Katie Nation. And this is a tome. I don't recommend this book to everyone. It really gets into the cognitive studies that are behind what we call the science of reading. But one piece out of this book that I think was a helpful takeaway for us to think about is that there is not a pre-wired area in our brains for reading. But several genetic biases create a gamut of neuronal preferences for different types of visual stimuli. During reading acquisition, so that's that period of time where we're learning to become readers, visual word recognition simply lands in the cortical location where neurons are most efficient at this task. In all humans, the intersection of genetic gradients creates a single sweet spot for letter strings, which is commonly referred to as the letterbox area. And so all of this is to say is that if we're not intentionally building that network, it's not just automatically developing. It develops through those conversations. It develops through intentional experiences with the phonology and morphology of language. And if you think about it, writing and reading is a relatively new invention for humans. And if you read Dewan's book, Reading in the Brain, or if you read Mark Seidenberg's book, Language at the Speed of Sight, they talk a lot about how, since it's a relatively new invention, we don't just have this preset network in our brain for this. So actually, the area that used to be used for us to recognize images in nature, since so many images, if you think about like a tree or a landscape where we have vertical and horizontal lines, we have intersecting lines. Letters are that way too. And so the part of our brains that used to process those lines in nature is now being recycled, essentially. That pathway of neurons is being recycled to interpret the language. And Stanislas Dewan calls this neuronal recycling. All right, so then we get into dyslexia, and you all know what that is because you're very curious about dyslexia. But just connecting briefly back to the brains of students with dyslexia, their neuronal recycling isn't happening in the same place. So for most of us, this happens in the left hemisphere of the brain, but for people with dyslexia, there are often clumps of neurons there, and that's the genetic component. So because there's clumps of neurons, things don't attach there. So often the next best spot is the same spot in the brain, but in the right hemisphere. So they have a spot for orthography and phonology to be connecting, but it's not the easier pathway of if everything is just in the left hemisphere. And because of that, people with dyslexia have difficulty generalizing. And so you may have seen this picture before if you've read Seidenberg's book. But if you take a look at this side, you see that we have, these are 26 different letters, but all the same font. This is 26, this is many of the same letter. They're all A's, but they're very, very different. And so for those of us who are not dyslexic, the brain pretty quickly generalizes that these are all A's. For somebody with dyslexia, it makes copies. And so instead of having, one or two representations for A, the lowercase and uppercase, we could have multiple. And then that's what slows that processing speed as well. So if reading is cumbersome, we don't do it, right? Unless you have Bet forcing you to come to tutoring twice a week, you're probably not working on reading a whole lot. You're doing the best you can to avoid it. I think I'll come back to this video a bit later. So you might be aware that the International Dyslexia Association has revised their definition. Raise your hand if you've already been to like a class about this. Okay, a couple people. So it's a very long definition. But there's the part in bold here is the part that's going to connect to the purpose of this presentation. So we have dyslexia as a specific learning disability characterized by difficulties in word reading. Okay, this is surprising to no one. Affecting accuracy, speed, or both, and/or spelling that can vary depending on the written language system. Again, that part, not controversial. We would expect that to be there. These difficulties reflect performance at the low end of a continuum of literacy skill and occur despite evidence-aligned instruction that is effective for the individual's peers. The cause and development of dyslexia involve the interplay of multiple biological and environmental influences. And I think with the Human Genome Project, we hoped that, oh, maybe this will help us really know which genes it is. Well, it's not that simple. Unfortunately, I think it's 46 different genes come into play here. So anyway, I've highlighted environmental influences, which I'll get back to in a second. Then we have that phonological and or morphological, good job, Pete Bowers. Difficulties are common but not always present. Among the secondary consequences are limitations in language development and academic progress, as well as challenges to psychological well-being and vocational opportunities. And I see a lot of people nodding because you know this has real ramifications for kids when they don't feel successful when they're readers. Although identification and targeted instruction are important at any age, language and literacy support before and during the early years of education can be particularly effective. So I probably should have put this in bold too. Language and literacy support before and during early years of education can be particularly effective. And that's what has led to the project that I'm going to be sharing with you about in a little bit here. Those environmental influences and the early years of education. So when I was a middle school teacher, I thought, you know, maybe if I just got these students earlier, they wouldn't struggle so much with reading. And then I switched to being an elementary teacher, and I thought, oh, there's already so much of a gap. Maybe if we just got to them earlier. And so that's one of the questions that I had a long time ago that got me to the resources that I'll share with you in a bit here. So when we get to environmental influences, when I first read this definition, I couldn't have named what those environmental influences were. And being fully aware that many of you in this room have someone with dyslexia that you love, or maybe you're the parent of, or maybe you are yourself, I just want to say that the environmental influences doesn't mean that if there were poor environmental influences at your home, that you caused the dyslexia. The dyslexia was already there. The neurological structures, like I said earlier, we can see are different at age 1.5. But there are things in the environment that can be protective factors. And actually, Pete mentioned this today, how morphology is a way that doesn't, it's a way that helps you learn about language that doesn't require phonology, which is what dyslexics struggle most with. So anyway, I dug into the literature about those environmental influences. And this study, if you're not familiar with it, it's out of Finland, so it's a little harder to find in the United States. But if you have access to a university database, you can find this study probably yourself. But in Jyväskylä, which is a big city in Finland, they did it's now a 3 decades long study about dyslexia and what are these factors that have been shown to make a difference. So they have followed over 200 children. They're still following them now, even though they're in their 30s, that had families where there was a risk of dyslexia. So someone, a primary relative, a close relative, had dyslexia. And so in 1993, they started following these students. And they found that the family literacy environment lessens the severity of dyslexia. Now, this is a little bit controversial in the literacy world because we also know that reading aloud to your kid doesn't teach them to read. And the study is not saying that it does, but it does serve as a protective factor. Why might that be? Any ideas? Yeah, the oral language part, the syntax part, you're learning how complex sentences are put together, the vocabulary piece. And Pete would argue that in those conversations as you're reading the book, that you can even start talking about how those words relate to each other. And then they also found that students with expressive language delays and delays in learning the names and sounds of letters lead to more severe dyslexia. And those of you who are in the tutoring world, you know that. You know that many of your students with dyslexia also have DLD, or speech and language concerns. So the tricky part is all of this is occurring before students even enter our school systems. And Minnesota's lucky because we have a great early childhood family education program that many districts offer, but that doesn't mean that everybody attends. And it's not free, which is a barrier for some families, although some districts do have a sliding scale. But oftentimes, if we're talking the K-12 public school system, you have to hit a pretty high threshold before you're going to qualify for speech and language services, which is understandable because resources are limited. But if we look at the compounding, the snowballing effects of the decision not to intervene early, you see the problem that we have today, where around 40% of children aren't readers. A little bit more on environmental influences. This is sort of a fun study because everyone loves music, right? But music class for babies showed enhanced neural responses to variations of temporal structure, which is a skill that underlies our ability to recognize the temporal aspects of speech, like syllables belonging to the same word. And so that rhythm and the beat are working on those same networks that we will later use for phonology in reading. Then another study here from Jimenez, Scheel, and others talked about the quality of those home literacy experiences. So if we're doing shared reading and we're discussing the story, if we're asking questions about the story and talking about the book's illustrations, relating them to real life, all of these things matter, as does rhyming together, making puns, or other wordplay. Again, these experiences aren't teaching your kids to read, and they're not enough. And when our school system was doing just these things to teach kids to read, we had massive failure. But these things are helpful for building the pre-reading skills that then once they get to you in school, they're ready to connect those letters to the sounds or those graphemes to the sounds. So early intervention is a big piece of what Nadine Gabb out of Boston Children's Hospital and Harvard has talked about. So our brains are most neuroplastic from birth to age 7. So the more of this we can do in early childhood, the better. Our brain will reorganize itself based on our experiences. And so any high quality experiences prior to school is going to reduce the implications of the severity of dyslexia. Notice that doesn't mean they won't have dyslexia, but they're going to have compensatory measures. And since it's on a continuum, all of these protective factors that we can do ahead of time are going to lessen the severity and difficulty. Other protective factors from articles in the Annals of Dyslexia, building and strengthening connections, verbal ability, working memory, vocabulary, and language comprehension. And that might have just brought the image of Scarborough's reading rope to your mind, right? Because these are essentially the red strands on that model. I'll pause here if there are any questions or things that you'd like me to reiterate or comments. Okay. All right, so where does this lead on the journey to public health? 2 years ago, I was at the Reading League conference in North Carolina, and I attended a presentation from Dr. Andy Aline and other doctors as well. And he spoke about literacy as a public health crisis. And this sort of led me back to the early factors of reading. And so he was a doctor, and he admitted that while they talk about literacy at doctors' visits, especially if they have a program like Reach Out and Read or Dolly Parton's program, it can be a conversation that pediatricians are having, but too often doctors themselves don't know a lot about dyslexia. In fact, Andy admitted that he didn't really care about dyslexia until he had a family member with dyslexia, which is like everybody's story, right? Like it's not on your radar until it affects you. So anyway, in his presentation, and this picture comes right from his presentation with permission, he talked about the consequences of reading failure. And in particular, he took a look at the zip code, a particular zip code in Monroe County. And I know the map is a little bit small, so I'll read the smallest parts for you. So when we're looking at life expectancy, the lighter the color, the longer people are living. So the lightest shaded areas are living, their average life expectancy is over 82 years. And then the darkest blue, people on average are living less than 76 years. And as these are all surrounding communities, it was a very interesting study because you wouldn't expect that somebody living just a few miles away from you is going to have much different outcomes. But what they found, of course, was that poverty was a factor. But they dug into it more to try to figure out, does poverty cause illiteracy and therefore illness? Or is it illiteracy that causes poverty and illness? Or does illness cause poverty and illiteracy? And essentially, they couldn't exactly conclude, but they know that it's related. And where Dr. Align sees a lot of relation is just in the aftercare. So your visit with your doctor is often verbal, or it is verbal, but then your aftercare plans are not. They give you a printout. Can you read that printout? So for example, in one of Andy's studies, he found that the asthma management plans, asthma is a very common condition, are written at an 8th grade reading level. So are you able, if you don't have that gift of literacy, are you able to even care for yourself properly if you're not able to read and comprehend some of those things that people would consider basic, right? You get your medication, you need to know about how to use it. And then, you know, this sounds so dramatic, but I'm not trying to be dramatic, it's just the reality. We know that 85% of the juveniles in court systems are functionally illiterate. And 60% of all federal inmates, which includes white-collar crime, are functionally illiterate. And if we take a look at the cost of our prison system, it's massive. So we like to, you know, we often hear that education is expensive, and a lot of schools in Minneapolis, or in Minnesota right now, are trying to ask levy questions and have voters approve funding so that they can more fully fund their school. And there's often pushback from that. But the converse of choosing not to fully fund our schools is we pay for it in human lives and financially through the prison system. Any guesses on what it costs to house a prisoner for just 1 year? Make a guess to your neighbor here. What does that cost? Anybody brave enough to call out a number? Anybody have a guess?
Do tell.
It does vary. What did you say, Cody?
100,000?
No?
I was going to say 75 or 80,000.
Okay, so it's actually about 30,000 per prisoner per year. Okay, what does your local school district get per student per year? 7,000, maybe 14,000 on the high end. So imagine if we invested that money early on. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I feel like other people need to hear this because it's a financial drain on our system. Obviously, mass incarceration, if you've taken a look at that issue, is a beast of its own that needs overhaul, but that's not my topic today. But we're also paying for it in human lives. And if you take a look at the circumstances that many people who end up in the prison system started from, how the school systems often don't meet their needs, and then where they end up, I mean, it's heavy. It's a really heavy topic.
That was a national average cost
Yeah, it's on 30,000. So there are prisons that are more expensive and some that are less expensive. So just one more study here on the consequences of reading difficulty. A great meta-analysis by these fine folks listed at the bottom took a look at 34 studies that had over 16,000 participants. They looked at poor and typical readers on measures of anxiety and depression. And what they found was that poor reading correlates with both anxiety and depression. Because that internalized reading anxiety has outcomes. And I know I'm preaching to the choir again because so many of you work with students with dyslexia. But in case you don't, or maybe your child has dyslexia, you know that they spend most of the day feeling dumb, right? They feel like, oh, Maggie right next to me is getting this no problem. Why am I not getting it? What is wrong with me that I'm not able to connect these dots? And so having the label of dyslexia is really helpful for so many students because then they understand, oh, my brain works differently. I'm going to have to spend more time practicing this before I'm able to read like my peers. There's not actually anything wrong with me. I'm still super smart, but reading is more difficult for me. But I guess the purpose of this slide is not to make us all feel depressed, but just to say that investing in literacy early has so many human benefits, not just financial, that's a piece of it, but it also just has that humanization element to it, where we have to care for each other. And the CDC has this health impact pyramid. At the top are things that have the smallest impacts. At the bottom are things that have the largest impacts. So poverty and education actually fall in that part that has the largest impacts. So the work that you are doing as an educator, you are genuinely shaping the lives of your children. And we need to make sure that we're doing that the best we can. So trying to solve the problem of, okay, I was teaching middle school. I thought maybe if I hit them earlier in elementary school, I could be successful. And then I realized with all of the neuroplasticity studies that really we have till like 7 or 8. Not that it's not able to be remediated after, but it's just so much more difficult. And so I decided to work on creating some handouts, and I'll give each of you a set of these. So it's paper clips, so you can take the whole bundle here. So if you would like to take one and pass them on. I decided to create these handouts with the help of all of these researchers that have given me such helpful knowledge, with the experience of working across the K-12 system, and with some input from my friend, Dr. Erin Gillette here, who looked over them and helped me out, and from a lot of encouragers along the way. I developed some handouts and started speaking with some pediatricians at Alina about reaching parents earlier. And a key piece of this is not just information, right? Because we're all bombarded with information constantly every day. But if we could get the pediatrician talking to parents about literacy at well-child visits, we have a much easier way for parents to buy in and for parents to take it seriously. You take seriously what your doctor says to you, right? They're a trusted authority. So if we can put those together, the idea was that we could possibly impact families. So I'll give you a minute to just look through some of these handouts, and then I'll tell you about the study. So go ahead and take a few minutes. All right, so as I mentioned, there were 5 Alina clinics that distributed these handouts. Their handout looked like this because at this time the Reading League hadn't picked these up. And so the goal was education as empowerment. Can we reach families early? Can they have high quality yet accessible information, and practical tips to target specific age levels. And so it was a small study, just 5 sites, but the majority of the people that were handing these out were doctors, some were licensed nurse practitioners. You can see the clinics that tried them out. I then asked, how often did you provide patients with the handouts when you met with patients from birth to age 5? And we had a decent response rate, especially because this wasn't a mandate. This was just an ask. I was just asking people to do this. And if they did provide patients with handouts, how were they received? 66% of the time they were positively received, or the other percent was neutrally. No one got offended or upset. And then the providers were asked, how did this go? Was it something beneficial? Would you like to continue? And all 5 sites decided to continue. They would like us to offer the handouts in additional languages, which makes sense. And then just the logistics of it. Can they already be printed, especially if they could be printed in color, because at the doctor's office often it's just black and white. And could we offer it digitally? Maybe it could be added to a well-child summary, which some people access online. And then more visuals, fewer words, which was the goal. I was pretty excited when the Reading League said that they would be interested in publishing these. So if you've been on the Reading League's Compass site, they have specific resources for all kinds of ways people might interact with literacy. And one of those categories is pediatricians. And so these are now accessible on there. They're not easy to find, but if you go on there, you can certainly find them. So you are really the next step, because this was just a little project. We got it at 5 clinics and are going to expand within Alina. But I'm curious to hear from you as you took a look briefly at these handouts and thought about this. You're all change makers. You're spending, I know that because you're spending your Saturday here. You could be doing a lot of things. Your families might wish you were doing other things, but you're choosing to spend your time here because you're a change maker. And so all of us are just little pieces of this puzzle of changing our whole system. And I would just like to open it up to you to see if you have any ideas. And volunteering an idea doesn't mean that I'm going to hunt you down and make sure you follow through. But obviously pediatricians, speech and language clinicians, this is an area that I don't have a personal connection to. So if anyone does and has avenues into that network or their conferences, or you think that this could be a helpful presentation for them, that would be great. More with ECFE, preschool groups, libraries. But will you take a minute just to chat with the people around you, and then we'll come back with your ideas if you have other ideas where these handouts could be helpful.
And I can't remember the questions about what as she was all the questions
and he's like, can you do it? But I didn't but all I did was whatever, whatever, whatever,
First of all, I didn't know the details of your study.
Yeah.
Slide. Ask Kathy
Oh,
to
sure.
slide in my class.
Yes, of course you can. I love it, and it makes me feel better that you feel like you learned something. Oh, Erin. I know. Is that how we learn to read too? Yes. I do love the cozy spaces. Oh. All right, this is our time to hear from you. What came up in your conversations? Yes.
So I have a 5-year-old.
Yes.
Every time we go to the doctor, we do a well-child questionnaire.
Okay.
So maybe even creating
Oh.
questions to incorporate into the
Yes.
questionnaire to help.
Oh my goodness. Lisa, will you write that down for me? Thank you. I love that idea so much.
Can you say it
I
out?
was wondering too if that will inform like whether doctors decide to give out the help tips or like, any of the help guides.
Yes. So for those of you listening online, tell me your first name again. Candace had a great idea about the well-child questionnaires that are sent to families ahead of time. Maybe there could be a question about literacy. And then that gets parents thinking like, oh, yes, either, oh yeah, we're doing that, or this is on here, maybe I should be doing that. Yes, I love that idea. Yes, go for it, Julie.
So I work with students with cognitive disabilities,
Uh-huh.
and one of the challenges is that historically teachers have this idea that there's only a certain level of capability that these students have, and they do not expect great things from them. And so they also share this information with parents. They downplay the capabilities of their students. And so they do not often provide structured literacy.
Sure.
And a lot of these laws that are being in place are
Yes.
not being targeted and
Sure.
put in place for setting 3 students. I would love to see developmental pediatricians focus on teaching parents and sharing with parents that your child is capable of becoming a reader, so that when their child goes to school, they are not just hearing from the teacher saying, oh, your child's going to just get a functional curriculum. They're not
Yes.
going to have access to structured literacy because they
Absolutely.
can't. And instead, it empowers parents to then be an advocate for their child, saying, no, my doctor's telling me my child can do
Yes.
this. I expect this from the school.
I love that. And Julie, I really wish we had a microphone on you because that said it so eloquently. But for those of you, or do you think it picked it up?
No, just
Just
please,
repeat it.
yeah.
Okay. So I'll just briefly summarize Julie's brilliant response that our students in level 3 settings, often the bar is not high enough. And perhaps if we provided these handouts to pediatricians, then the parents have that education to know that developmentally it's possible for their child, that they should have access to structured literacy as well, and that we shouldn't lower that bar and think, well, they only need, life skills, or what was the actual functional curriculum. Thank you. Yes, so important. Are you writing that down for me too, Lisa? Okay, thank you. Bet.
A question, when you were running this pilot, are you handing the age appropriate?
Yes, so just the one, so pediatricians would print, so if you have a 3-year-old, then they would print the one that's either 2 to 3 or 3 to 4. Yes.
And then where does the one on dyslexia come in?
Oh, yes, thank you for bringing that up. So if you look at the very last page of your handout, it talks about dyslexia. And so this one can come into play. Pediatricians are giving it whenever parents had concerns. And as I spoke with the pediatricians, we tried to make it so that you all know that the convergence of dyslexia and science of reading was that everyone benefits from structured literacy. So they don't have to have a formal dyslexia diagnosis before we can start intervening and doing these good things. If they don't actually have dyslexia, well then great, they're gonna whip through those interventions or those lessons really quickly. And if they do have dyslexia, then that progression might take longer. And so we don't worry too much about that diagnosis, although pediatricians could certainly refer if there were a lot of characteristics of dyslexia. Yes, so that one was just kind of an optional one that pediatricians could hand out if they felt that the conversation went there.
Right, good, good information.
Yes, great. What else? Other, Arlene?
I was perusing the IDA website the other day,
Yes.
and I found a talk that I had given a number of years ago
Okay.
on exactly this topic.
Okay.
And I was giving suggestions for parents. Like you can say, to teach segmenting, what's the first sound in mom? Or what's the first sound in get? Or any number of things so that they start pulling off the sound. You can do that with some 3-year-olds.
Oh, for
but
sure.
Definitely with 4-year-olds.
Yes.
And then, can you make one word out of bath, tub? Because that's now a blending thing. Or side, walk. And you can move those closer together at first and then pull them farther apart
Absolutely.
as you're going through. There are a whole bunch of them. If you're a member, you can get online. I think it's still there. I was surprised because I did it a long time ago.
Yes.
But it was there, a month ago or so.
Okay.
But there are
Great.
so many things. I have 5 great-grandchildren. I'm 96, so I can have
Wow.
5. And it's amazing what the 2-year-olds can do as far as saying the alphabet. And that one of the other things is sing the alphabet with them and try to separate the L, M, N, O, P.
Yes.
And then have them sing it with you. Then you can take up an alphabet strip and you can sing and point to the letters and do this over and over and over again. And then ultimately they can say it, and ultimately you can say point to the B. Now point to the letter before the B, before and after. And what's the name of that letter? And point to the letter after the B, what's the name of that letter?
Yes.
I think they're still online, so you can
Okay.
see the whole thing. But there are a lot of things that you can do with 3- and 4-year-olds that are fun and are not out of the realm of possibility for parents. I mean,
Absolutely.
they can do any of
Yes.
those things.
Yes. So those of you who are watching the recording, we're glad you're watching, but you are missing out on being in the room with one of Minnesota's literacy greats. So I will just recap, and then next year you can come in person so that you don't miss out. But anyway, Arlene Sunday was saying that she gave a presentation about things that parents can do and that it's still available on the IDA website. And then she gave examples of simple blending and segmenting activities and alphabet activities that she covers in that presentation. So be sure to check that out. Thank you. Did you have something, Faye?
Yes, I really like what you're saying and the connections with poverty, literacy, illness. But we're looking at education, we're looking at the health system, but the poverty, I think distributing some of this like with WIC
Yes.
or other areas where they distribute food, if poverty is connected to it,
Yes.
then education should be connected to the poverty.
Yes. Oh, that's a wonderful idea. Brilliant. Yes. Sarah? Hold on, let me recap, I'm sorry. So Faye connected to the presentation with the aspect of poverty and literacy and suggested that maybe some of the programs that are helping our community members who are living in poverty could be given this information alongside that assistance. Sarah?
I'm wondering if you could do some TikTok videos. Yeah, for real. Seriously,
Just
I'm
short.
a new grandmother, but
Yes.
the generation of young parents, they don't read this.
Yeah.
Well, I think Arlene has to do it. the TikTok.
Yeah.
Yes. Let's get Arlene out there.
They're getting all their information on
Yes.
social media.
Yep. Yep.
And I know there's a lot of parenting things.
Yes.
But it's not done by people who know anything necessarily. You
Yes. Yes.
know? Yeah.
So for those watching the live stream or the recording, Sarah suggested that we do some of this information on TikTok videos. And if that is you, you should contact me and maybe we can work together. I'm a little on the camera shy side, so maybe I could plan things out and someone else could, be the face.
Well,
Yes.
I'm sorry. That's, when you said that I don't even know how to make a reel. I
Sure.
control the pictures.
Yes.
But what that made me think of, those of us in higher ed, that could be an assignment. for
Oh,
our
sure.
service leaders.
Yes, I like
Create
that
a
idea.
TikTok video.
Okay,
And
that
here are the
explains.
parameters,
Ooh,
here's
now
your
you know what's coming.
topic. No, I don't know.
Yes.
But I don't have to teach them technology because
They'll know how. Yes. Yes, let's talk about that. Okay, so Dr. Erin Gillette had a wonderful idea about having pre-service teachers maybe create the TikTok videos or the reels or whatever short video platform, YouTube Shorts, whatever, because they're very comfortable in front of the camera. Yes, I love it. And that would be a great way for them to process some of the, lecture type information or the research study that they read. So, or a podcast. I know someone in here who has, 2 people in here that have really nice podcasts on literacy. Okay, so I am so glad for this conversation. Thankfully, Lisa took some notes for me. If you would like to reach out, I do have my Reading League email address here, or you can find me at St. Thomas. So my email, if you would like to reach out, is abby@mn.readingleague.org. And then I'd just like to leave you with this quote. I just genuinely would like to thank you for being here, for spending your Saturday working for the kids, doing what you can to learn yourself so that we can do better for the kids that we get to serve. I love this quote. It's attributed to the actress Lily Tomlin. I don't know if that's really where it came from, but I couldn't find an original source. But she famously said, "I always wondered why somebody doesn't do something about that. Then I realized I was somebody." And I'd just like you to leave that. You are somebody. You are already impacting lives, and you can continue to do so. And I hope that this gave you some new ideas on a new avenue you might go. So thank you for coming.